The Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our ServiceNow series, where we interview the best and brightest of the industry to share their story, advice, and views on the exciting world of ServiceNow and digital transformation.
Hello everybody, it's Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International. Hope you're doing really well. It's part of our Alldus ServiceNow podcast series. I'm very happy to welcome Annette Muldowney. Annette is a VP at Lakeland Bank. Annette, great to have you on the show today.
Good to be here, Mark. Excited.
So Annette, tell us a little bit about your journey to ServiceNow and how you got into the world of that. And then it'd be great to hear a little bit more about your role at the bank and what the company does and how you're actually helping people to succeed.
Sure, absolutely. So my journey with ServiceNow started, at this point, probably about 10 years ago. I worked for a large telecommunications company, and we had an internal homegrown system. And we had made the decision that perhaps we needed to go more industry standard. So we started a selection committee, of which I was a participant on, representing my organization. We got to learn all about what ServiceNow could bring. ServiceNow was selected, and then I was a focal point for the implementation of ServiceNow in my organization. So that's when I first got started with ServiceNow. Fast forward to currently, and I'm the ServiceNow lead at Lakeland Bank. And our main responsibilities right now is really taking our environment and putting it back into the box. We, in our initial deployment, got a little bit away from the standards, and we want to get back to that because the platform does such a wonderful job of driving those ITIL industry standard supported processes, and it really makes it a lot easier for companies to expand and improve their processes, right, built in natively into the system. Now, Lakeland Bank is a wholly owned subsidiary of Lakeland Bank Corp. Incorporated. We have over $10 billion in total assets, and we serve both commercial and consumer banking needs in New Jersey and in Highland Mills, New York. We've been recognized, and we're very proud to have been recognized as a best in state bank by Forbes and Statista for 4 consecutive years, and we've been rated as a best bank to work for by the American Banker. And we're also a member FDIC and an equal housing lender.
There's some really nice achievements. Not every company has them as well, so it's nice consistency along the way with that.
Absolutely.
So you're coming into your 8th year of experience within ServiceNow. For people listening in, and some will be novices, some will be kind of experienced practitioners. Can you give us a little bit of an idea about why you feel it is the platform of choice in your sector specialization?
Well, again, I have to go back to the industry standard processes. That's a big factor in choosing ServiceNow. A lot of times what you find is you kind of get into the mix of your own internal processes. I must do something a certain way. And that can paint yourself into a corner in some situations. Going back and looking at the platform as a whole and how it sets out those best practices makes it easy for deployment. Additionally, the fact that it is low code makes it another easy implementation. I mean, it's not super easy, but at the same time, it doesn't require a set of very complicated developers to get the system up and running to support the business services you have in mind for the platform, as well as the integration. I mean, you can really grow with this product. We're starting with the IT service management modules, but there's other modules that come into play, and you can get to a point where your teams are working in one platform. You're not having to go from ServiceNow for your incidences over to another system for projects, over to another system for asset management. Having that all integrated in and having that data source just makes the day-to-day operations much easier.
So one of the challenges, and a lot of our listeners will be kind of concerned about that, is the customizations and maintenance afterwards. What type of considerations need to be taken into place when it comes to that?
There's a lot, because when you get in, again, you start looking at your processes. We do it this way and the system doesn't. So what does that mean? And why is the system better than my process? And what you end up finding out is customizations are bad. There's no other way to say that. Oftentimes people are looking to automate their workloads as much as they can, but then, you kind of get into that same paralysis that way, and it makes it difficult to go forward. So, in my opinion, what you need to do first off is start with your processes. What are they? Why are they? Why do we do it? We've done it 7 years this way. Well, does that make sense to continue to do it that way? And also look for a strong implementation partner. I can't emphasize that enough. In the current situation that we're in, we had a number of different partners come in, and that's part of the reason why we're going back to out of the box. We didn't have that oversight that you would have to ensure that you're not stepping on each other, that you're not doing that customization. And an effective partner can really help you along the way. And I have to say that as an advocate of using a strong implementation partner, it's also very important that you're a partner. What I see often happens is you get a partner that will come in and then you kind of hand everything over to them. They go and they do exactly what you say, not necessarily looking at the holistic picture of maybe what your roadmap looks like, and then they hand it back to you. And now you have this item that's built and you don't know the ins and outs necessarily. So when I look for my partner that I've been using for some time now, I look for a true partner. My team starts with them every step of the way. We're in the trenches coding the implementation along with them. We understand why decisions are being made and what is driving that, as well as why was perhaps a configuration done a certain way? Why was a customization chosen? So that way, when we go and do the next upgrade, we understand whether we need to truly skip that or if reverting back to the box makes sense. So when you choose that environment and you choose your partner, to me, the key to success is really, being in the trenches with them. And that makes all the difference when you're getting ready to set something up. And like I've
Yeah.
said, we're going through a complete relaunch from scratch.
Yeah, in the short term, it does feel quite easy to hand it over. But the reality is when you take it back, you're not really privy to their decision making, and some of the I suppose the considerations they've taken on, where your value system may be completely different, or your school of thought on how you approach it, and then you need to get your head around that, and then most importantly, get the buy-in from everybody else within the business. Could you tell me a little bit about some internal case studies and maybe some of the learns that you have from that experience?
Absolutely. So, when I started at Lakeland, the first thing I did, obviously, is I looked at our environment and looked at our health scans and said, what's the best thing to do? Are we going to just do a simple reconfiguration? Are we going to, do a total relaunch? So we went with the total relaunch, and a big part of that had to do with a process we have that's called ERF, which is our Employee Access Request Form. And this employee access request form process kind of set out to do everything. And it was initially configured again by different sets of individuals. So you ended up with a process that was like building a car with 4 steering wheels, 8 wheels, bucket seats in the front, no seats in the back kind of thing. So what we've been really focusing on is taking this idea of this holistic, you want anything, you want access to a system, you want to onboard an employee, and breaking that out into a more logical process flow so that it's a lot more user friendly and that it's incorporating the overall needs of our users. and utilizing a lot of the functions within ServiceNow to just make the process better, like text to guide the users to how do you answer questions, as well as, just kind of going back to the basics. So this form is so complicated, and it's not even complete, which makes it even more complicated. So it hasn't been able to be maintained as the business has changed. So what we're doing is going back to basics, basic user order guide, kind of 101. And what we're doing with that is we're taking all those onboarding and offboarding pieces of that form and putting them into an order guide. That way we can keep those business functions related to onboarding or offboarding an employee, which is a completely different animal than, hey, I would like to get access to system X or system Y. And then we're creating this in an automated fashion as best that we can. So one of the big issues we had was user error. You spell Smith S-M-I-T-H, but maybe this Smith is S-M-Y-T-H. So you get all this fat fingering, so to speak, of names. So we're doing some integrations with the actual onboarding system that does the recruiting. So we get all of those kind of human errors out of the way. And then we allow the onboarding manager to select what do they need, access to systems, software standards, hardware. So that way on day one, our goal is that new employee can hit the ground running with the bare minimum. Now, as you move into your position and you find out, hey, I need access to system X or system Y, now instead of going back to this onboarding form that doesn't make a lot of sense anymore, you're going to go to the normal catalog experience and go through the I want and select those catalog items that give you that next level of access that you need, while having the approval processes in place to kind of have that stopgap. Because, sometimes when you're browsing in the store, you really don't need that. You think you do. But this way we can make sure that the approvals are in place and we remove that large aspect of confusion that we're currently seeing in our environment with this.
Yes, so it's very, very important on 2 points, because we see from the data that if somebody has a poor onboarding experience, such as just not having their PC ready to go, they can't log in and speak to their team manager on their first day, and they're reading documentation, there's a very, very high likelihood within 6 to 9 months that person will leave the organization. And also, they'll tell their friends. So there's a really, really big impact, because there's usually a pretty extensive hiring process before that happens, as well. So that's something to take into consideration. And then also just keeping things nice and simple. You don't necessarily need everything straight away, but if you've got the choice of a few different selects that you can pick, it allows you to have the right information at the right time. And then as you get a little bit more confident with the systems and find your footing, you've got more options for later on. And then that kind of builds confidence across the business, but also as a kind of transparency across the business, because you got a consistent way of onboarding people, and rather than Paul over here got a nice onboarding experience, but Rachel got an inconsistent process, and why was that? And if we've got that kind of consistency, it kind of takes out a lot of the kind of worries about that up and down.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that is, a big goal with this this reset that we're doing. This IRF process was a big piece of it, but we also are just deploying every aspect of what we own today. So making the ITSM experience better as well. So we're taking this in chunks. So now you're here, and what happens when you have that first incident or you need something else? An easy to use catalog for requests, strong but balanced incident processes, change and problem processes using, an employee center for transparency. I mean, that's a big thing. Once you get into the company and then you're like, hey, everything's great, I've been onboarded, I have my first problem. You don't want that first problem to be hidden. You want to have that transparency. What's going on? How do I see it? How do I interact? And putting those type of things in place helps, again, to build that better relationship and that trust between our customer and the services that we're delivering, from whether it's IT or just standard services. I mean, service management can be more than just my PC is broken. And so we're really excited to see the team's work pay off here in the coming weeks as we relaunch this.
One of our final questions that we like to ask, Annette, is the advice you'd offer to your younger self starting out, and it'd probably be our closing question.
Absolutely. This was one, this is something that you think about, like what would I do differently? And sometimes you start thinking about the thing that happened last week. But, my big thing is always ask why. People don't necessarily like that all the time, but when I come into an organization and I'm trying to understand your processes, I'm like that 3-year-old that we all were at one time. Why? Why do we do it this way? Why is this way better? Can we do something differently? Why? And I would say, don't be afraid to continue to do that. A lot of times, especially when you're starting out in the industry and you start asking why, people will kind of get that sense of like, well, why are you asking? Why do you know? Why do you think you know more than I know? Those types of things. Stick with those questions. Keep asking the tough questions, getting to know those processes. Look at that strong data that's going to help you also answer and ask those questions. That's how you improve, and that's how you continue to grow your skills, but it's how you become a really strong asset to improve and move your organization forward. And so that's what I would say. Don't get disheartened over, people saying, well, you shouldn't be asking why so much. You should. It's a great question to ask.
Yeah, and then also it kind of comes with confidence, because when you kind of start out, you don't necessarily want to rock the boat. You just want to kind of go to status quo. But after a while, you kind of figure out that actually part of your role is to improve things. And you need to try to figure out, well, is this a presumption, or is this actually the status quo? And the people understand this is the status quo. So it's really, really good. And I think in every organization that you go in, it's something that you need to continue to do, and for whatever position that you're in. Annette Muldowney, Lakeland Bank VP, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.